Okay, hello everyone. Very happy to be here with you all. I would love to. The first thing I'll ask you in the chat is if you guys, what's one big takeaway you have so far? We're at the end of the day, so I would be remiss not to see what else you have learned at this amazing institute. Oh, Julie said there's been so many great resources. That's so cool. Yeah, feel free to let us know in the chat what's been your takeaway from this learning filled day. Um, Super happy to be joining you guys. I'm going to be talking today about managing AI waste in its different forms. So cool. Lynn says confidence to implement new routines and curricula. Amazing. My name is Rachel Riggs. I'm a technical advisor at World Education. We are a global nonprofit that is working toward equity in education. And our work in the US is all around adult education. My background is in language learning. So, as an ESL teacher and administrator in an adult education program. And since I have really honed my focus on the use of technology for learning, and I'm leading our AI for Learning and Work initiative. So, I've had the great privilege of being able to connect with a lot of learners and teachers and administrators around the use of AI in adult education. Um, and so, yeah, I'm super happy to be here today with you all to learn alongside you. Um, I want to just open up with this question around what is AI waste to you? So, obviously, you saw the title of the session, and you joined with some interest in managing AI waste. And so, I would just love to hear, how are you defining that? You can tell me in the chat in just a word or a short phrase. What is AI waste to you? When I think of AI waste, I think of this image that you're seeing right now. Um, Look at it, you guys. What is this? What is this? Um, this was an image that I generated in, I think, Canva, probably a couple years ago now. And my prompt was simple. My prompt was just the word facts, F-A-C-T-S, facts. And I just wanted to see like that simple open-ended prompt, like what would AI consider to be facts? And apparently this is what facts are to AI. Yeah, a total monstrosity. Okay, cool. So we have some. Okay, someone said pretty much all of it is waste. That's funny. Inaccurate information and expended energy is how Julie is defining it. I think that's pretty close to kind of where I'm coming from. Beatrice says useless. Jamie says a new term, but I know the energy requirements are exorbitant. A lot of water usage. Okay, so we're connecting it to some environmental concerns. And then Buck is bringing it even to just prompting strategies. Cool. Yes. Okay. So some great ideas in the chat about what AI waste is. And I'm defining it today as unnecessary, duplicative, or misaligned content that we generate using AI tools. And so really thinking about what are we using AI for? Is it needed? Is it a replica of something else that already exists? Is it relevant and aligned to learning objectives, learning goals, learners' needs? And so anything that is not those things is really what I'm considering to be AI waste. And that's what we'll talk about some strategies and tips for addressing that. I started talking about this really from hearing from educators and the interest in this topic. We have this AI integration framework that we use in a lot of our trainings and presentations, and it gives you 6 dimensions of AI integration. Within that, there are lots of considerations and questions to ask yourself, questions to ask others, scenarios. And so it's a framework that we use a lot just to spur conversation and thought around AI integration in adult education. And as I have been presenting this to various groups, I continuously was coming across a handful of educators that really wanted to talk about and learn about the environmental impact of AI. And of course, it's challenging when you're talking about AI. It's a huge topic with lots of concerns, lots of things that branch off of it. It's challenging to always talk about, to go in depth with something like the environmental impact. And so I started to really think about and read about what would it look like to really to consider the environmental impact and continue to support educators in using AI in ways that are meaningful to them. Because concurrently with this, I also know that a lot of teachers use AI and they're finding it to be very helpful to them and they're finding it to be helpful to their learners. So it felt like how can we reconcile that friction of there being a negative environmental impact and a lot of natural resource usage, but also there being a demand and a need and an appreciation for AI tools. So when I talk about managing AI waste, I'm certainly going to talk about the environment as one aspect of why we should try to manage AI waste. Somebody alluded to it in the chat, and I've just alluded to it myself, that AI, specifically generative AI, is very taxing on our natural resources. I like to look at this website. And I think this is a cool thing to even introduce in your classes if you have conversations about AI or ways that you could contextualize this. It's called What Uses More. And on this website, you can choose a task. So I'm going to choose paragraph of AI text. Okay, so let's say that we ask AI to just generate a summary of something. And then you can make other specifications like what is the energy source it's drawing from? What's the data center, the climate around the data centers that power the AI? What's the complexity of the prompt? Is it simple? Is it complex? Is it a reasoning prompt, which takes more time and more energy from the AI? How many prompts are being used? And then the quantity of those paragraphs. Okay, so that's the first task. So let's say we're asking AI just to generate a paragraph, and I'm going to leave the other settings just like that, and we'll keep them the same in the second task. The second task I'm going to choose here is, let's say, searching Google without AI. So you're doing a Google search, and there's no AI summary that comes up at the top. And we will keep these the same just to match them up and we're going to calculate. And what you'll see at the bottom is the footprint between these two tasks. Okay, so you can see task one has a footprint of 3 light bulb minutes, and task two has 0.3 light bulb minutes. So this is kind of fun. I mean, there's a lot we could go into on this and learn more about. I'm not going to go into all of it right now, but this is a good way to kind of visualize how generative AI is different from some of the other tasks that we perform with technology and why it's important to focus on generative AI conservation as compared to some of the other things that we do. It's also good to think about, expanding our thinking around what digital tasks, technology tasks we do that require a lot of resources. So streaming is another one that is also very taxing on the environment. So we could recalculate this for watching a 1 hour Netflix movie, and you'll see that watching a 1 hour Netflix movie is actually a lot more taxing than our paragraph of AI text. So it's just I think a cool way to really think about, look at, compare why AI, in light of generative AI, there's an important conversation around the environmental footprint that we all should be having. Can you, Susan, can you even do that anymore? Search without AI? Yes, you actually can. You put in minus AI at the end. So you can see my Google searches here. I forget how you do it actually, but somebody Google it for us. Let's see.
Funny, you need to Google how to Google it.
Yeah, total education minus AI. Is it like that? No. Yeah, I forget how it is,
I think
but
it
it's
works.
something about adding minus AI at the end of your Google search that takes the AI out of it.
Well, there we
Um,
go. I learned something from you, Rachel.
oh my gosh, I taught Susan something? Okay, we're done. Let's go. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so there's that aspect, right? There's the environmental aspect, and that is certainly what inspired me to start talking about how teachers can manage AI waste. But there are two other very important things that I think are more closely aligned with the work that I have always done. One of them is time, right? I've always been interested in helping teachers with time. That is one thing that we always are running short on. I was running short on when I was a teacher. And so I always like to think about like, what are the ways that we can support teachers to have more time to spend on the things that they love to do and that are impactful in learning, and less time on things that are more rote and maybe not leveraging their skills as efficiently. So time is also critically important. We know that teachers can spin their wheels with AI tools, spending a lot of time trying to get something out of it that is actually useful versus AI waste. And the last one is attention, right? There's so much that teachers have to think about and do. There are initiatives, there are standards, there is reporting, there are the students in our classroom. And so our attention is often divided into all these different places, especially when it comes to technology. We have all these new tools that come up constantly and grab our attention. So I also wanted to think about how can we help teachers really focus their attention on learning and using AI efficiently versus testing out a million different AI tools and just generating more AI waste. So the way that I approached this was to look at okay, we're having some tips here for the AI summaries. Julie says minus AI at the end seems to work. Cool. And then I somehow managed to separate the AI summaries from my general search. Maybe it's specific to Firefox. Okay, so maybe there's like a setting in some browsers that also would help you do that. Cool. So I approached this looking at the waste management hierarchy. So this is something that we're probably all familiar, reduce, reuse, recycle, as kind of something that maybe we were taught in school, or we've seen signs for, or we actually enact and practice in our lives. The waste management, the AI management, the waste management hierarchy starts with prevent, okay? And when we talk about preventing waste, we're talking about we're not generating any waste. Um, an example of that would be reusable water bottles, right? So if we are reusing a steel water bottle, or a cup or a glass, we are not generating waste in the form of a plastic water bottle. When we talk about reducing waste, we're talking about generating less. So rather than preventing it altogether, we're just doing less. We're generating less. An example of that might be double-sided printing, where if you print on one side of the paper, you're going to end up using a lot more paper. If you're double-sided, you're generating less waste. Another one is to reuse, use it again. Maybe a clothing swap, right? You get a bunch of people together and they exchange clothing rather than going out and buying new clothing. That's reusing. And then finally, to repurpose or recycle. And that's where we take something and we find a different use for it or repurpose it in some way, like a laptop. You bring it to maybe a center that will refurbish it and give it to somebody else. And they can repurpose it for their own use. So this is the waste management hierarchy just in general, everyday terms, right? And we know that at the top, the prevention, right, is the most effective way to manage waste, and recycling is the least effective, and they go in that order of, if you want to manage waste, you start by preventing it as the most important, and then reducing it is a little is is the second, and then reusing and then recycling. And so that's kind of like the best. Prevention would be the best, and recycling would be great, but still not the best, right? So I looked at this and I kind of thought to myself, okay, what does this mean in terms of the use of generative AI tools? And I do a lot of work with teachers, and I've been doing research studies around how teachers use AI. And so I tried to kind of take what I have learned from all of the teachers that I get to work with and map that to this waste management hierarchy. I hope there I hope there are no sustainability experts in the room who feel like I just botched the waste management hierarchy. I did my best on that. So the first
Probably not
one
in
we
this
want,
audience, Rachel.
what was that,
But you never
Susan?
know. I said probably not in this audience, but you never know.
You never know. And if you are an expert and I got something wrong, please, I invite you to correct me in the chat. I'm not too proud to take some corrections and revisions. So when we talk about preventing, right, I think one of the key ways that we can prevent AI waste is to view AI as a tool, not a solution. And this is a struggle because the way that AI is marketed, especially generative AI, it's very much marketed as a solution and a comprehensive solution and a solution that's going to solve pretty much all of our problems. But I think that even just a shift in our perspective and our thinking around AI toward it being a tool that is part of a solution helps us to put it in its rightful place. And what I mean by that is that we may think that teachers struggle to find enough time to do all of the things that they're asked to do. So that's a problem that we have. And we then might be tempted to say AI saves teachers time, therefore it's a solution. Well, usually not. Usually it's part of other tools, resources, and pieces of the puzzle to form a solution. So it's really a tool or it's a part of a solution. It's not a comprehensive solution. So I think just putting it in its rightful place as a tool and a resource helps us prevent using it or relying on it too heavily to solve all of our complex problems. Another form of prevention is to think about making good use of tested and trusted tools before we turn to AI for something. Some of the best examples of this, one is a calculator. You can certainly calculate problems using large language models, which are the AI models that underlie tools like ChatGPT and other chatbots. But that's really not the best use of those tools. Those tools are better for language tasks, and they're not always accurate when they do calculations. And so, what's good to use when you need to do a calculation is a calculator, which might sound silly, but it is a good way to think about. We have tested and trusted tools for specific purposes, and generative AI can do something, but it may not do that as well as those tools that we already trust. Another way to think about this is extracting information. So we know that generative AI is not always reliable in terms of different facts. And it's much more resource intensive to get a specific fact, like what is the capital of Minnesota, from a large language model than from a simple look on Wikipedia or in a no AI Google search or other ways that we could find the capital of Minnesota. So when we talk about extracting information, it's better to go to some of those tested and trusted tools for facts and figures like that versus generating them using generative AI. The next one is around the human touch. And I think about this in adult education a lot around like IETs and some of the occupational expertise that we sometimes need to infuse into our curriculum. So generative AI is good at contextualizing academic skills into different occupations and so forth. But there is a level of expertise, especially if you're running an IET and students have to take an exam at the end that's going to earn them a credential. Always best to rely on human expertise where humans are going to know the local context. They're going to know the different licenses that a student might need. They're going to know even the large employers within your location that students might end up working for. So that kind of occupational expertise is really important. I've talked to a lot of teachers too who say that their use of generative AI is effective because of their expertise around adult learning. And so they really view their own expertise in knowing what adults are going to find interesting, in knowing what is relevant for adult learners, and knowing what's effective for teaching adult learners. They view that as the primary factor in their effective use of AI. So it's another way to think about the human touch is some specialized expertise, like in an IET, but also our own expertise as educators and our experience with learners that can't be replicated by AI. So we are a tested and trusted tool. Okay, we're a little bit more than that, but you know what I mean. Another one is textbooks, right? So, and textbooks and other learning resources that have been designed by trusted companies. And so this one's pretty obvious, right? Those have been rigorously compiled and evaluated and aligned to standards. And so, of course, making good use of those existing resources is a great way to prevent generative AI waste. So let's actually use my presentation here as a test case. You may have noticed that so far I've used different types of images. I have used some photographs, I've used icons, illustrations, and emojis. I could have generated all of those using generative AI tools, right? And the result of that would have been, okay, I'm sorry, my dog keeps scratching at the door. Do you guys hear that? I'm just gonna let him out. The result of that would have been probably a lot of AI waste in the form of using a lot of natural resources and computer processing power to result in images that I don't ultimately use because not all AI generated images come out the way that you want them to. I could waste a lot of time trying to do that and get the AI to cooperate with me. I could waste a lot of my attention on trying to get that to work versus focusing on what I wanted to present to you guys today. So rather than do that, I pulled images from a lot of trusted sources that I use a lot of times for images. And these are Unsplash. Unsplash has wonderful photographs that are a lot of them very professional looking, um, a lot of them free. So I like to plug those into my presentations. The Noun Project is a great source for icons to include in your presentations. Of course, there's Canva where you can come up with a lot of designs. I created these different images and pulled them from Canva's content. And then, of course, emojis give a great visual representation of simple things. And yes, and we have more examples in the chat. Pexel and Pixabay are other great image sources, okay? So in that way, I just prevented generating any AI waste by going to my trusted tools and resources. We know, though, that AI can be useful. And so to prevent it altogether, we can certainly do, and we'll be fine if we do that. But some teachers find a lot of usefulness in relying on AI tools for different purposes. What I have found in my work is that these are kind of centered around three areas. One is inspiration. A lot of teachers find that when they generate something with AI, it will output a product like a lesson plan that has elements or ideas that they didn't think of including, but they are ideas that they find to be actually really useful and end up utilizing with learners. So teachers find a lot of inspiration and creativity using generative AI tools. Resource gaps. We know in adult education that we're not a resource rich educational setting necessarily. And so we do need to be able to develop resources that fill certain gaps. When we notice that a student needs to learn X about math, but they need to learn it in a certain way, or even it would help them understand it if it was presented in a certain context. And so we want to fill those resource gaps, and teachers have found that generative AI is very helpful with that. And then finally, media. You can't always find the media that you're looking for. One huge area that I see adult educators using generative AI for in terms of media is to turn text into audio. The adults that we serve are busy. They sometimes are learning English as a third, fourth, fifth language. And so just to have audio in addition to text, aligning with, UDL, Universal Design Principles, and accessibility is super helpful. And there are generative AI tools that do that really well with any content that you may have. So that's one area that I've seen a lot of use of AI tools. Oh, something in the chat. That's right. Totally agree with that, Buck. Yeah, um, I totally agree with that. And I actually think a lot of educators would agree with what you're saying, that images are just not up to snuff and usually take people a lot more time to generate than just finding what they needed and other sources. So we created this when do I AI chart here, and what it does is it kind of splits it's kind of a decision making flow chart, you could call it that, that splits up the different ways that we've seen teachers mostly use AI, gives them something to think about in terms of what do you already have that you could turn to, and then ends with an approach to prompting that would be especially effective for what you're trying to generate. Yeah, good idea. Carrie's asking about tools for generating audio. So Carrie, there's natural readers is one that a lot of teachers use. Actually, I'm going to go to a whole chart of different tools in a second, but Adobe now has a read aloud in the free Adobe Acrobat. It's kind of robotic, but it's something. Um, there's a tool called Speechify, but it's quite expensive. I think natural readers is in terms of affordability and effectiveness, probably one of the best options right now. Pace AI is a tool that also gives audio for reading. With any content. And the last one I'll mention is Microsoft's Immersive Reader. So if you can get something into Microsoft Word and teach learners how to turn on that immersive reader, that's another great way to increase the accessibility of whatever it is that you have in that Microsoft Word doc. Or it could also be like in a Wakelet, if you use Wakelet, put the text in there. There's a lot of ed tech tools too that's not their sole purpose, but they do have that feature. So yeah, I'm sure our colleagues will add to what I just said. There's probably a lot more, but um, you guys let us know what you use. Okay, so in the window AI chart, we have what do you need, what do you have, and a prompt approach, right? So if you need lesson or activity ideas and you want to spark that creativity, what you have are colleagues and coworkers, right? And so going to them in I think almost all teacher PD, there's always a report at the end that what participants found to be most helpful was what other people said about what they do. So I think just that collaboration, teachers working with other teachers, is a great way to spark that creativity. Of course, if you're working at 11:30 p.m., you can't always turn to your colleague or call them on the phone. In which case, you can use generative AI and use a conversational, so a very natural language prompt approach to spark some of these activity ideas. Okay. If what you need are learning resources, you can turn to your learning standards, the curriculum that you have available to you, whether it's been paid for by your program or the many free and open resources that are out there, as well as learner insights. What do learners provide to you in terms of designing learner resources? And then within that, we've found that generative AI tools are especially helpful if you're looking to contextualize learning. So put some of the academic skills like math and reading into certain contexts, like the grocery store, workplace, going to the bank, right? Some of these everyday activities. extending learning. So if you have maybe a curriculum or you have something you're working with, but you need to give learners more practice opportunities, then generative AI is great for that. Or differentiating. You have something, but you actually need it in a couple more levels because we know a lot of adult education happens in a multi-level way and multi-level classes. And so an approach here would be to use a structured prompt that can help you generate those learning resources. I'll talk about what that is in just a second. And then finally, media, where, as we discussed, you can go to free and open repositories that have media. There are even some that have sound bites. I think Pixabay is one that has just like different audio that you can use in creative ways. So lots of those repositories are out there. You could go there. And if you absolutely can't find anything right, you can use generative AI with a descriptive prompt to generate the kind of media that you need for learning. Thank you, Buck. Yeah, we're coming up. Actually, this is the tools. No, the next one's the tool slide. So, how is AI used in adult education? I'll kind of speed through this, but we know that it's used in outreach and recruitment for various purposes, like developing social media campaigns, designing logos, translating materials. It's used in intake and placement of adult learners. It's used in adaptive assessments. It's used in surveys, sometimes even to interpret survey responses. It's used in orientation videos if there's some kind of avatar. It's used in teaching and learning a lot for curriculum development, for expanding access to content by providing it in multiple languages or multiple modalities. It's used in adaptive learning platforms. So if you use something like um, Khan Academy, it's going to personalize that learner's next steps based on what they've completed. And that's called adaptive learning. And then it's used in even evaluation of learning and transition. So administrators use it to develop evaluation plans and protocol. They use it to analyze data. So it's just kind of gives you a sense of the whole range of different use cases that we see for AI and generative AI in adult education. And these are some of the different tools that are used. There are general tools like Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, Copilot, Pi that offer natural language interactions and realistic images. There are lesson planning tools like Magic School, Diffit, as well as different tools for engagement. Like some of these quizzing tools. I think quizzes just changed their name, actually. I need to update that. And then there's adaptive learning platforms like I mentioned, Pace AI. You might be familiar with Duolingo. And so these adaptive learning platforms use AI to give learners a personalized experience. There are tools that turn learning into something that's multimodal, like natural readers that I mentioned earlier and Snorkel. Design tools like Canva, productivity tools like Notebook LM is one that teachers are loving right now. And so there's a whole lot of different tools that are used in adult education. Thanks, Buck. Um, for different purposes, right? So when we think about all of these tools and all of the different ways that we can use them, we're getting now into how can we reduce the generation. So we're still using them, we're not preventing. Now we're thinking about how can we just reduce maybe what we're doing with them. And I really like to think of it more as refining what we're doing to reduce AI waste. One key strategy here is prompting. And I'm sure you've heard of this before. A prompt is something that you put in to a chatbot or another generative AI tool, and it's essentially the instructions that you're giving to get what you want out of the tool. And so one way we can think about reducing AI waste is to be strategic in our prompting, because that is what gives us a quality output and prevents us from having to generate and regenerate, right? The longer those conversations go on with chatbots, the more the more that the AI is taking up resources and generating what could be waste, right? And so in our prompt, we can really use very clear instructions, and we can control the length and format of the output, right? So if you've used chatbots before, you might have experienced that you ask it a question and it gives you this whole, sure, I'm going to give you blah, blah, blah. And then it gives it to you and it says, what else would you like? Let's think about doing blah, 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 right? So sometimes the length can just be like, okay, wow, I really didn't need all of that. And so we use this prompt framework called RACEF. And the idea here is to give it a role, give it an action, give it some information about the context, give it an example if you have one, and then tell it what format you want the output in. So you could say output three ideas for the title of my lesson. Okay. And it's just supposed to output one, two, three. Okay. So honing that length and that format is one way to reduce AI waste. Another way is to go a little deeper into your use of the tool by looking at your settings and thinking about what user settings could help you optimize your use. So one thing that I've done in ChatGPT, where you can give custom instructions and tell ChatGPT how to interact with you on the whole, is that I have told it to always give me concise responses. So that helps me with my own time waste, right? Like I don't want to read through all of the stuff all of the time. And it also helps with that environmental concern, right? To keep the generation shorter and reduce it. And yeah, so I just put that into my what traits should ChatGPT have. Another way to reduce is to interrupt chatbots, which means that when they go and they start giving you a result and you're looking at it and seeing that it's not what you wanted or it already gave you what you wanted, just to click the little stop button that it always offers you and get it to stop generating as a way of reducing AI waste. So we have don't generate, that's prevent. We can generate less, and that's reduce. And that can be controlled with prompting, settings, or just interrupting it and telling it to stop. Let's get into how can we reuse AI generated content. And there are two ways that I've seen this happen. One is teachers, and it is not me, you guys, it is not me, but there are some teachers that have very organized drives. They're very good at file management. It's not me. I want it to be me. I'm working on it. But that is a great way to reuse your content is to keep it organized for yourself so that you can retrieve it when you need it next, right? And so I think that could be in your files, setting up your folders the right way, labeling things the right way. Or, even if you just know I generated this for this presentation, you could go and find it. I do that sometimes. I'm better at the searching for stuff that I've used in the past than the organizing the stuff that I'm using. So that's one way to think about it, is just how can you get yourself organized so that all of your AI generated content is in a retrievable format so that it can be reused. Another way to think about it is through a shared library. So this is a library of AI generated images. And there are actually a few of these floating around, and I think they're really cool. It's a cool way to think about if us not all generating AI stuff in our silos. And then we're doing a lot of wasteful generation, but how can we share that stuff? I talked to a teacher today. Actually, she's an administrator and a teacher, and she has set up a SharePoint site with all of the different AI generated lesson plans and stuff that she has created for the program. And so teachers can go and they can reuse some of the things that she has used AI to generate. So I think just thinking more about how can we reuse our own stuff, right, in our own practice, but then also how can we be good about organizing and labeling things and sharing them more broadly with other teachers who might be teaching similar subjects. Are there locally powered models specific to one software program, kind of like Clippy? Yes. And so like Copilot, I think would be a good uh example of that, or Gemini. So those are your kind of embedded co-pilots across your whole workspace, that are specific to Gemini is specific to Google products, Copilot is specific to Microsoft tools. Another thing is you're saying locally powered models, and so there are actually large language models that you can download on your computer so that they are not using the cloud, and thus they are more they're conserving more of the computer processing at those data centers. One of them is called GPT for all. So if you want to, they take up quite a bit of space on your computer, but and they're not as user friendly, but they're certainly out there, and they are a great way to work locally off of the cloud to conserve some of those natural resources. So we have prevent, reduce, reuse, use it again or offer it to others to reuse, and then finally recycle. And when I think of recycle, I think of all of the work that has been done around open educational resources. Open educational resources, actually, let me just get in the chat, you guys. Give me a Y if you are familiar with open educational resources, and an N for no if you're not. Okay. Okay. Okay, cool. So it looks like generally familiar, maybe some are not. So there are free educational resources out there, right? Khan Academy, I think, is a great example of a free resource. And then there are open educational resources, and open resources have licenses, usually Creative Commons licenses, that give you permission to remix or adapt the resource. And so they're a step beyond free, because it's not just that you can take them and share them with your students, but you can actually take them, make a copy of them, change some things about them, and then share them with students. And so when we think about recycling, I like to think about how can we turn our AI generated resources into open educational resources that can be remixed and adapted by others. A good example of this, and even, within your own use, I think, how can you use open educational resources with your use of generative AI to output something that might be a little more refined and honed on what you're trying to do with learners. An example of this came up in a teacher training that we did, where a teacher took the TSTM lesson plans. So these are lengthy lesson plans that came out of the Teaching Skills That Matter initiative, that was through the Department of Education. They had published these great lesson plans that showed how you could contextualize durable skills into different areas that are really critical for adults. So what we saw in a teacher training that we did, showing teachers how to use generative AI to develop their curriculum materials, is one teacher took that lengthy lesson plan, and they asked generative AI to give them ideas for how to adapt that and refine that for their learners. So it wasn't quite at the level they needed it for. And so the AI gave them a lot of ideas in terms of simplifying the language, but also with the activities, some activities that would be more level appropriate. And so it's a great idea, I think, in terms of. Thank you, Amy. Amy shared OER Commons. In terms of taking those open educational resources and leveraging them in a way that also helps you make the most of your AI use. This was something that someone in that same training created, Matthew Nichols. And it is, I'm just going to show you what Matthew did. Wait, why can't I see this? Web page scanning box. Okay, there we go. Um, this is in Skillbox. So Skillbox is a tool that we created at World Education, and it's a tool that is free to everyone. You can create your teacher account, create your student account. It's never going to ask you for money, but it's a way to locate free and open resources for adult learners. It's also a way to put together a list of different links, like if you wanted to put everything into one collection or blocks for your learners. Yes, actually, very similar concept to OER Commons, except that it's specific to adult learning and instead of having like full lesson plans, it's broken down to a more granular level, usually for you to remix things. Um, so what Matthew did was he wanted to create a web page to help learners skim and scan quickly while they were working online. But he wanted to do it in a way that was very kind of contained and confined so that they didn't just end up all over the place and confused. So he actually used generative AI tools to create a web page that could be used in that way. And then someone else, Billy Blocks, took that web page and remixed it with this GCF Learn Free lesson to create their own lesson with the web page that Matthew had created. So it's just an example of one teacher using AI to develop something that is reusable and another teacher taking it and repurposing it. And so here we have the GCF Learn Free digital media literacy lesson on how to read a web page. And then this is Matthew's lesson that he created using different AI tools, a chatbot and Canva, to create this nice skimmable, scannable web page that they could look at to pick up information quickly. And then at the end, Matthew added a Creative Commons license so everyone could see how they can use and reuse this web page. So I think that's just a great example of how we can work together collectively to use AI to generate the things that we need to fill resource gaps, but then share things in a way that those same resources can be recycled in a sense. Yeah, sure, Carrie. Here you go. So our whole hierarchy here, we have prevent. So that's just not using AI, essentially, right? Um, and we have generating less, and that's really about just reducing the amount of AI that we use. Using things again, that's reusing, and then finally adapting and remixing AI generated content. In other words, recycling the stuff that we use with AI. Oh, that's so cool, Carrie. See, we got to share our stuff. Carrie is teaching a unit on that right now, so that is so perfect. Um, and that's really like Carrie, that is the reason we created Skill Blocks was so that there was a place that teachers could add stuff like that they make that is reusable and contribute to this broader library of free and open educational resources for adults. So yeah, cool. Okay, so I want to hear from you guys. You know, this for me was very conceptual, it was definitely informed by some research that we know how AI is used in education. We know some of the areas where it has the most impact. We know some details about how it impacts the environment. So some of this is based on that. Some of it's based just on my experience and interactions with teachers and the ways that they use AI. But I would say it's largely exploratory in that the strategies I've presented to you here are really just things that I have thought about in terms of how teachers can really enact this idea of managing AI waste. So I would love for you guys to share with me, how are you managing AI waste? What are some of the things that you do to not use AI superfluously or generate, like we said at the beginning, a bunch of unnecessary, redundant, duplicative content that's misaligned to adult learning. What are your strategies? Let me know in the chat. Would love to hear from you. I'm going to give you a thinking time. Okay, wow. So really two themes coming through very strong in the chat. Prompting and sharing. So those are two of the things that I'm picking up on a lot from across the board. So that prompting is a key strategy for getting what you want out of it. And then that sharing is a way that we are kind of helping others reuse and recycle what we've made. Yeah, Julie. Oh my gosh, me too, Julie. I really, when people started bringing it up, I so avoided it. And actually, a colleague challenged me and she was like, don't avoid that. Don't brush it off. You know, if educators are bringing it up, it's a concern they have, and as a teacher trainer, you have the responsibility to address it head on. I felt like it was so out of my reach, and so I can totally relate to that. It felt like it wasn't relevant. Until teachers really pushed me to see that it is relevant. It is something we're concerned about. It's something that we feel responsible for. And so it's something worth addressing. Thanks for being honest about that. I totally agree. Okay. Reuse. I've not used it yet, but now I know what not to do. Okay, cool. Good, Beatrice. I'm glad. Okay, awesome. And you know what? Two is bringing up a really great point in the chat that they have tried generating some things and it was useless to them. And so I just want to say that part of the way that we come to understand kind of people call it the jagged technological frontier. In other words, um, it's a weird and unpredictable pattern of what AI is going to add value to and what it isn't. And part of the way that we come to understand that in the context of our roles is by experimenting with it and deciding whether it's worth our time or not. And I think a lot of that is having to just like tune out the hype, check it out. If it doesn't add value to your work, don't use it, you know? And so that's a they gave just a great example of like, I didn't find much value in it. And adding to that, I do see how students should be taught to use it responsibly. And so I think that's another great way to approach it is think about what's the guidance that you might give to students around using AI? What are some ways that you can acknowledge and affirm the ways that they might use AI in their own lives and their own agency in using AI tools, while also helping them learn more about using it strategically, avoiding the pitfalls, and so on. Great points in here. Yeah, okay, and Susan's saying better luck with adapting than creating from scratch. I think that's a good tip there. Learning has helped relevancy. Okay, okay, interesting. Okay, Buck's using it to create AI mentors for ELL students, reducing wasting of time. You know, there's also research to support that, Buck, in terms of their many learners' anxiety around reaching out to an instructor, from English language learners to like learners who are in coding classes at Princeton. You know, I think that's a shared experience across the board for students is that sometimes it doesn't feel comfortable to ask an instructor. You don't know if you're interrupting their day, if you're asking the right questions. And so there's been a lot of research out there about how it's giving students an AI to interact with can actually help them get more support that's personalized and that helps them feel they can be more open with what they're struggling with. I can attest to that. I'm taking a statistics class right now and I don't feel comfortable with it. I don't feel comfortable asking questions about it, but I have had some conversations with ChatGPT voice that have helped me understand the concepts a little bit. So, um, okay, cool. Lynn is saying adapting and sharing, organizing for easy retrieval. Awesome. I wanted to share with you guys some other resources that we have from our AI for Learning Work initiative. We have a prompt book that I love because it's just a bunch of prompts from other adult educators that shows you kind of what they're using it for. We have that AI integration framework I showed at the beginning. We have a generative AI crash course in Moodle. It's self-enrollment. You can get in there and take that. We also have an AI Literacy Matters brief that someone mentioned earlier about like helping students. And this brief shows you how AI literacy intersects with some of the other things that we address in adult education, like financial literacy, digital literacy, workforce preparation. It gives you some ideas of what AI literacy means for adults. So if you want to check that out, that's there as well. And we're developing right now, we're doing some research on teachers using AI, generative AI, for the creation of curricular materials. And so we'll have a report coming out as well as some training resources coming out of that initiative. So that will be coming soon. And of course, we'll share with Susan and that will get hopefully out to your state when it's ready. I'm happy to take some questions. Let's see, how are we on time? Oh, 3 minutes. So I could take probably some really quick questions. Put them in the chat if you have them. I also wanted to share with you, we do monthly sessions, tech strategy sessions that are sometimes about AI and sometimes on other topics. If you want to join us for those. Julie says, which is your go-to AI tool? Okay, my go-to, Julie, depends. If I am doing something kind of creative, I use ChatGPT. And if I'm doing something voice-based, so I do a lot of commuting and like sometimes I really just want to like think through an idea or understand something. And so I use ChatGPT voice quite a bit. So ChatGPT for more of those like creative conceptual things, Gemini if I'm doing something for work because it's secure, it's approved by my company. I can add my Google Drive files into it and talk to it about those. So I say those are my two go-tos. I use Speechify also. It's a tool that reads things aloud to you. It's like 150 for a year, so it's kind of costly, but I use that to listen to journal articles and reports and things like that. Yeah, I like that. It helps me. And they have new things in there now, like you can listen to a summary of something, or you can even ask it to quiz you on something. So those tools are useful. That's good too. Thank you for joining. As a staunchly anti-chatbot person, you are welcome here, and we are fine if you remain staunchly anti-chatbot. I'm sure you're doing your job amazingly with or without AI, and I'm sure that that's true of all of you. Thank you so much for having me. This has been awesome. You guys are a great group. Yeah, thanks. I hope we have another chance to be in the same Zoom space together.
Thank you so much for bringing your expertise to us here in Minnesota, Rachel. It's been wonderful having you at our inaugural Digital Learning Institute.
Amazing event, amazing people. Thank you for having me, Susan.
All right, I am going to turn off the recording.